try that again. Thanks for the question. So in terms of Absa in the region, we have on-the-ground presence in all the markets that we operate in, that being Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and the Seychelles. So what we do is we bring that on-the-ground presence in terms of coverage, i.e. relationship management. We also bring the sector expertise. We also have presence here in Kenya. My colleague Zara Kanbai is currently on maternity leave, but she's on the ground, has a vast network of clients, operators, developers, and investors. And then what we bring from the SA perspective is the Pan-African experience, expertise. So we bring that all together to try solve for our clients. In terms of leasing, historically, I think everyone can appreciate that the environment was dominated by US dollar leasing. What we see now is the evolution of that, depending on the sub-segment asset class, depending on the underlying leases, that will then dictate whether the financing should still be in US dollars or in local currency. What you find is typically, or historically at least, commercial offices in Kenya, for example, have always been in US dollars. We're now seeing a fragmented market where some tenants are preferring local currency leases and clients are following suit and looking for local currency funding and the like. So it's not a one-size-fits-all, each case by case, and we're able to provide for local currency and US dollar funding.
Thank you, Sandile, for that. Let me just remind our panelists that you look at the cameras there as opposed to looking. I know I'm asking the questions, but...
My mistake.
Not to worry. Sakina from Haas Consult. Quick question for you here. Of course, Haas is a market leader in this space. What are you seeing in terms of what the market is now scouting for? And we have seen a lot of volatility, especially given a lot of the rationalization of aid, if I could say. And what has that meant for the real estate market? And what next for Haas Consult, essentially?
Is this working? Yeah. So I'd say that given, I know that Kenya is in its growth phase, but given that we operate in the off-plan, primarily residential sales market, we've seen that financial safety is still a very big concern for buyers. And given that the purchases are not very regulated by the government at the moment, and so despite the leaps that we're making in design and meeting supply gaps, at the end of the day, safety is the most important thing. People want to know how the investments are protected, if properties are being delivered with quality, are they future-proofed in terms of design, in terms of investment returns. Sorry, your second question was the volatility in the market?
Correct.
So yes, there has been, from the residential, I would say primarily from the residential side, the volatility, yes, it's been there, but Haas Consult has been largely insulated from it. And this is because we have, when we're conceptualizing development, there's a clarity of strategy. We don't build following trends, we build following the truth, and that means we have very big data-driven development processes, and in that we're looking for locations that have where demand far outweighs supply. We also make sure that the developments that we're delivering have a very strong design intent and knowledge of the consumer base and what they're looking for. And so when you do that, you end up having, you end up being at the apex of real estate demand, which makes sure that your properties are always the demand far outstrips the supply. And in that case, you're largely insulated from these sort of volatile economic shifts. What's next for Haas? I would say that we're starting to move the design-led and data-driven developments outside of Nairobi and looking for secondary cities where there is rising demand. We believe that the investment, property as an investment class should not be a Nairobi-only story. And so our next frontier is really to take our track record of delivering design-led, data-led design residential real estate to other cities in Kenya.
Thank you, Sakina, for that. Finally, Mark Danford, Knight Frank. Your report, the Africa Wealth Report, is always something we look forward to. Just help us understand what are some of the major trends you are seeing. And back to the question around the volatility triggered by the Trump administration's policies. Are you seeing major disruption, and how are you positioning yourself?
Great questions. So I'll start off with our Africa Horizons report, which comes out today, actually, at the conference. We have identified 4 or 5 key elements of importance or trends. One of them, obviously, is the massive housing crisis we have across Africa. Africa is it is the fastest urbanizing population in the world. The World Bank is suggesting it's going to be 60% urbanized as a population by 2050, which is 900 million people living in urban centers across sub-Saharan Africa by 2050. So that's obviously a huge demand for housing, and the housing at the right price. The second is everything that goes along with that. So the industrial piece, everything to support that massive urban population. So a lot of light industrial, a lot of distribution, a lot of logistics, cold storage, food storage. Then REITs, so real estate investment trusts, when we start to look at attracting international capital onto the continent and starting to get those big ticket investments from international funds or sovereign funds, creating portfolios that are of or tick the boxes from an investment appetite perspective for international investors is very important, and REITs offer a position for that. We also think that there's space for local domestic REITs, and we're seeing more and more of those spring up in markets like Kenya. The green opportunity cannot be overlooked, and that's vis-a-vis green financing, but also the need. Africa is, and we're speaking very generally when we speak about Africa, but we really are at a turning point vis-a-vis committing to the green agenda and leapfrogging what our counterparts have done in other developed markets vis-a-vis ensuring that our developments are green and that they're truly sustainable. And finally, the mixed use discussion is never ending, and I think it really depends on your market. Here in Nairobi, we benefit from fantastic natural environment, great climate, and so people don't necessarily want to be stuck in a mixed-use development where you have your residential, your office, your retail all under one roof. However, there are, as we see more and more international business people moving to the market who are used to those sorts of environments, or they don't know the Nairobi market necessarily. They like that convenience of being under one roof, and it also provides a certain element of security, at least when you first move here. So it's becoming a bit of a two-tier market vis-a-vis mixed use. People that want to live in houses in green environments, and people that want to live in apartments and in mixed-use developments. And I can't remember the second question.
The Trump.
Oh, Trump. That guy. So yes, what's been going on and coming out of the White House has been very interesting to watch. I think 2 parts to it. The first is what the impact has already been, or what we've already seen as an impact. We've seen some impact to grade A office space in Nairobi. Nairobi is obviously a hub for the region, so a lot of agencies that cover other countries in sub-Sahara based in Nairobi. So while the funding might have been pulled for projects across our borders, the impact is being felt in Nairobi, or a lot of the impact is being felt in Nairobi. So initially, the first impact we've seen is in the office space, where certain tenants have asked to vacate and relinquish their leases. Some have asked for rent relief. We are yet to see a big exodus, and hopefully we won't see a big exodus in the residential space. We're waiting to see what happens there, and I think it's going to be very interesting to watch the next 6 months or so while other countries, other Western countries, create their development budgets for next year, and whether they follow suit with the US and cut funding to the region. And that will obviously have an even bigger impact, and also how this will impact downstream services. So it's not simply the agencies that are having the funding cut to them, it is all the support functions to those. So be that security firms, be that supply chain logistics, whatever it is. So I think this is going to be much further reaching even into local government projects that receive a certain portion of their financing from the US. So for now, we're waiting with bated breath to see how it all unfolds.
Thank you. Any burning questions before we close it up? Yes, please. Introduce yourself and your institution.
My name is Graham from the Standard Media. From your response on the Trump cuts, I know I read your report also had some aspects of it. How does an investor can cushion themselves from the effect of the Trump cuts from aid, considering the investment is, let's say, in Nairobi? How do you recoup, or which clientele do you go for now that the NGOs and other US-related businesses are not do not have the money? The second question, in terms of the fiscal space in Kenya generally, a lot of infrastructure has kind of stalled, and most times we look at infrastructure going to an area, then housing and such development comes into play. What sort of outlook do you foresee? Although I understand that we are going into PPPs to try and fill the fiscal space, but what sort of outlook do you foresee in terms of housing?
Who would you like to answer that? Me? I mean, I can start, and obviously I'm sure my colleagues here have views as well. I think the only real way to be defensive against a force like Trump is to try and reduce your reliance on foreign aid. So if you can start to rely more on the domestic market, you know, if you look at European markets, for example, I was having this conversation in Dubai a couple of weeks ago about the Dubai market. The Dubai market is 95% foreign driven. It's 5% domestic. Whereas if you look at European markets, they're 95% domestic, 5% foreign. So if you have a disaster in a European market, the domestic market really can't go anywhere, right? They're there to stay, they're not going anywhere. And it's the same to an extent in Kenya. So as we reduce our reliance on foreign investment, that will help mitigate that risk. Whereas if something was to happen in Dubai, for example, the 95% of the market, particularly in the residential space, can just disappear. Yeah, I think on the infrastructure side, my only real comment on that is that if we want to retain our positioning as the hub of East Africa, and in many ways grow into being the hub of sub-Saharan Africa, we need to invest in our infrastructure. We need to continue to invest in our infrastructure. And I was quoted as saying this last week, that, you know, we really need to focus on our airlift. You know, if we look at how the mega cities around the world developed, if you look back to London, Hong Kong, Singapore, Dubai, in that order, and then Nairobi to a lesser extent, it's all been around the airport and the airlift and the airline, right? So we really need to focus on ensuring that foreigners can get into this country easily, Kenyans can leave this country easily, and that's working on visa policies with European counterparts. It's working on easing the problems of international working people coming to Kenya as well and getting permits in place. And it's just making sure that people can transit really easily. And that's been the success of a lot of the big cities around the world. So that's kind of my view on those 2 points. I don't know if Sandile, you want to add something?
Yeah, maybe just to add, I think my colleague Jeff mentioned it in his opening speak, where he mentioned that his first trip was 12 years ago. My first trip was 8 years ago, and I've seen a dramatic improvement in infrastructure at each and every time I come visit. And given the lag effect of real estate, whether it be residential or commercial, that infrastructure has to come on stream first, then followed by real estate. And as a bank or as ABSA, we follow our clients. Our clients know more about the market than ourselves. I don't think from a residential point of view they would move into a node that doesn't have the infrastructure to support people living, working, and being educated in that specific node. So whilst infrastructure has slowed down, we haven't seen that slow down translating into residential developers and activity.
I think just to add to that, I think from a residential point of view and just looking at how the city is changing, I would say that a slowdown in infrastructure is going to be a little bit difficult for central Nairobi, for as long as we aren't creating nodes outside of the city that ease the congestion in Nairobi. The infrastructure in Nairobi is heavily is under a lot of duress. We're seeing, from our point of view, we're seeing a lot of residential units coming into areas like Kilimani, like Parklands, that feel like they're putting the city infrastructure under duress, and we're seeing a lot of residents associations reacting to this. For as long as we aren't developing these nodes outside of the city, I think we're at risk of Nairobi being an East Africa hub being an issue, because we aren't able to properly provide for everyone within the city, and the congestion in the city is becoming a bit of an issue.